Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the Art Education and Action Lecture Series, Teaching Art for Social Justice. This lecture is sponsored by the Art Education Program at the University of Arkansas and the Walton Family Charitable Support Foundation. Before we begin, I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional homelands and territories of the local indigenous peoples, including Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw nations, where the University of Arkansas is currently located. A portion of the Trail of Tears runs through our campus where the Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations pass through during this forced removal. By acknowledging the past, we recognize our responsibilities in relation to ongoing settler colonialism that eradicates indigenous peoples, cultures, and languages, as well as those colonial projects that dispossess indigenous lands. This statement is an invitation to recognize indigenous presence now in our communities and to reckon possible ways to support indigenous survivance. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker, Ondrea Levy, who is a visual artist in Tucson, Arizona, and teaches art at Tucson High Magnet School and conducts art workshops for adults in a community. She received her BFA in art education from the University of Arizona and is currently pursuing her MFA in visual studies at Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, Oregon. Ondrea is a practicing artist who has actively exhibited work and received a 2018 Citywide Teacher Excellence Award. She is an artist and educator who actualizes social justice in education. At this time, please join me in welcoming Ondrea Levy.
Thank you, Angela. Hi, I'm Ondrea, and today was my first day teaching in the classroom after teaching remotely this entire school year. So I'm just going to be honest and say I'm a little fried, but I'm really excited to present. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. And, you know, with the mood of me feeling a little fried, the title of my presentation is Pro Tips from a Teacher Still Figuring It Out. I feel like, you know, being a teacher, you're also a lifelong learner and you're always figuring out new things and seeing what works and what doesn't. Also, your students change every year, so you are always figuring it out. So during my presentation, feel free to throw whatever questions you have in the chat, even if they're super specific. I didn't realize this was a webinar, so you won't be showing me that cute dog in the background, but if this were a Zoom meeting, I highly encourage my students to show me their cute pets in the background. All right, so my background, I started teaching, I suppose, or my first teaching experience was in 2013. I taught at a feminist arts camp in Tucson. It was really DIY. I was just like a couple of young 20-year-old femmes that wanted to host a free week-long camp for young femmes in our community. And we did art, poetry, music. Trying to think. I think that was the majority of what we did. Some writing as well, zine making, and there was a showcase at the end. After that, I decided I wanted to. Well, actually, it was the same year. We'll go to my story of how I became a teacher. Later, I taught at MoCA Tucson. We did installation summer camp, which was like one of the coolest things I've ever done. And I started at Tucson High in 2016. I started student teaching and was immediately hired after I graduated. I also do adult pop-up workshops in person, but I'm going to start doing them online now because I miss working with adults too. I'm a practicing artist. I think that's really important for what I do because when I talk to my students, it's artist to artist, not art teacher to student. I definitely like to share how I navigate things as an artist, not as an educator. And I'm pursuing my MFA at PNCA. How it all started is this dude, Al Romo. He was my neighbor when I was 19. He was 92 and we met smoking on our porches. And he was a World War II vet who was really traumatized by the war. And so he turned to art, something he had never grown. He grew up in an indigenous community along the border in Agua Prieta. And he had never, had the luxury of watercolor painting growing up. But after the war, he picked up art and he became an artist. He sold paintings, he sustained himself through his art. And here's a picture of us in front of one of his murals when he was, I think he was maybe 94 at this time. And then this is his little dog, Cisco. I got him. Why I talk about Al? Because I met Al at a time where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but knowing how art helped him, and as a young artist, I thought it was so cool. I wanted to make art that, changed people in however way. I wanted to help people make art in a way that changed them. And so originally I wanted to become an art therapist and work with veterans. But during my art education courses and teaching in the classroom, I realized I really liked working with students. But the reason why I think this is so important is just because I think art should change people. And I think that art shouldn't just be something that's decorative. For me, social justice is how we teach our students and not only what we teach them. So that's kind of what I'm going to go over today, is how I teach my students in a way that promotes social justice in my classroom. So I think play is really important. Social justice is really can be really heavy. So I think starting the year with experiments and, different ways of using materials and looking at things and is really important no matter what age. You can see on the left, I have some like 8-year-olds, and then on the right, I have my high school students. Everyone likes to play, and art is fun, and it should never lose that quality. I think personally. It's very opinion based. Here's some examples of what some young students have come up with after we have our playtime. We play with projection, and this was from installation camp, where me and my collaborator Eli, we gave students a room in a museum to just go nuts with. And I think that says that is not only play, but it's also showing them the importance of themselves and their voice in a space like a museum, a space that's normally a really elite institution. Opening it up to children and showing them that their work is just as important as an adult's work, I think is really valuable for them. And then seeing themselves literally in the museum was really powerful for them. So speaking of the importance of voice, I encourage students to use their voice as much as possible in a way, like, literally with speaking or through writing, commenting on our message boards, which I will continue after the pandemic, or even in person learning. This was a collaboration I did with a local artist named Wesley Fawcett Cree, and she came to my classroom and interviewed one of my classes about their experience with the border. And this went on for, I think, 2 or 3 days, where we kind of did this, like, I don't remember, this poll where students just kind of send a word or two of what they think about the border wall, or what they think about borders. Oh no, here, in a word, describe the border wall itself. And you can see some of the things students said, and some of the things that were most popularly said are larger. And you can see a variety of opinions too in here. And really honest things like unsure. So we compiled all of these, and then we recorded my students talking about their experience with the border, whether they had been there or not. Most of the students had. Here in Tucson, Arizona, we're like, I don't know, like an hour away from the border. It's really common to go there, even for the day, even for a few hours. Folks cross over all the time. So a lot of my students had been, or family works in Border Patrol, or family lives near the border on the other side and you go for the weekend. So we compiled these words, we compiled their interviews, and then we had middle schoolers from another local school in Tucson illustrate how they felt about the border or things they've observed at the border. And Wesley turns these illustrations into animations that played with my students' voices. And this was shown at a museum, or it was shown at MoCA Tucson, the Contemporary Museum of Art. And was this really powerful event that also was in conjunction with a exhibition about featuring artists from the border. Here's another example of voice. This is, again, students getting a room in a museum and going nuts. This is one section of this room where students created the past, present, and future. And these were, I think, 8 to maybe 11-year-olds. And they all figured out who was working on what. This was this room where you would like walk through a cave, and then you would wind up in this room, which is an 8-year-old's interpretation of a teenager's bedroom. And then you would walk into this like dystopian, or you could choose, you could walk into the dystopian future, or you could walk into the future of their dreams, which is like hover cars, clean energy, or some of the other things. Everything was really blue in that room. Part of it was underwater because these are young children thinking about their fantasy worlds. But like the underwater part is cool, not like global warming crisis bad. The dystopian future featured a lot of war. But I really liked this teenager's bedroom because it was talking about what these students think about, like robots, but also like gun violence, which, you know, and I would say was really on young people's minds pre-pandemic. Social issues, homophobia, transphobia, things like that. So I thought this room was really interesting because these are 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds creating this teenager's bedroom, but these 8 and 9-year-olds are thinking about stuff like this. And this isn't what we asked them to think about. This is them sharing a part of themselves and what they think other people think about, what they think teenagers think about. another component of voice is really just letting students embrace their identities. This is something that I work on every year with my students. Some of my students I've had for 4 years, and we do projects about identity to also, in high school, they're figuring themselves out. They're figuring out what their opinions are and who they are and maybe where they fit in the world, which is something we all continue to do forever. But in high school, they're really figuring it out. So we do a lot of play with identity. I'm kind of just like showing you a bunch of things, and then I hope that this will all kind of like come together with some questions. Another part of voice is I use this this website called Padlet, and I'm not sure if other teachers have or like use. I'm pretty sure a lot of teachers have used it before, but we always post our projects on Padlet, but then students also respond to it, and they can see how other students might respond, and they can be, actually, let me go ahead and exit out of here. They can be like really cute and like comment on each other's work or like it. I think I only left it for them to like it on this, but I think Padlet is a pretty cool resource if you haven't used it before. It's a great way for students to not only show their work, but also reflect on it and explain it, which I think is important. That's something I'll be using forever, I think. Another component, I think, of how to teach social justice is research. So I think, especially maybe not so much with my 8 or 9-year-olds, but with my high school students, forming those opinions, I think research is important. We talk about various how to look at different viewpoints. We talk about credible sources, but then also how to synthesize that information in your own words. And this is an example of how I might have students do research, which is a visual journal entry. So they, might add some facts and then synthesize it a little bit right here. I believe the prompt was, what is an environmental issue that is important to you, and what are some solutions to it? And then they created work around their research. But something I like to tell students is that research isn't just reading and writing. Research is however you absorb information. It could be reading, it could be interviewing people, it could be listening to stories of elders in your community, it could be observing parts of or things in nature, or maybe it's a favorite anime that really inspires you and is part of your research. Research is just so much more than just reading and writing. And I think with art, when you are talking about social justice issues, it is important to also consider credible resources, but also to consider your personal experiences and the way you absorb information. Another thing I want to talk about for how to teach social justice in the classroom is your power dynamics. And I think that it's important to mention that, like in art, we're really lucky. We don't, I mean, maybe I think all curriculum should be this way, or all content areas should be this way, but I feel like in art, you can really be this right here, I wish I could highlight it, mentor, coach, or artist to artist. You can maybe take away some of this like power that I am the teacher and I know everything and you're going to learn from me, and just really just kind of coach them through it. To me, knocking down power dynamics is really important. And it helps students feel safe enough to share their opinion or make a work that could be a little scary for them, especially when we're talking about social justice. So relationship building leads to experimentation. When they're comfortable, they are okay with failing with something. So they're way more open to experimenting, and maybe they want to like burn some paper, or I don't know. Those are just like, that's just one thing that came to mind. Is this student was really all about drawing and pencil, and one day, after just feeling comfortable, she was like, "You seem like the kind of teacher that would be okay if I burned my drawing a little bit." And she did, and it looked great. She burned a hole through the center to reveal another drawing. So I think, building those relationships is important so that students know they can do something that's a little different. Social justice cannot be taught without vulnerability. Students need to, be real and be open, but also understand. What am I trying to say? Students need to maybe see how vulnerability is a strength. You can't have these conversations if everyone's too afraid to speak, or too afraid to share their opinion. So we have these conversations, and there has been, crying. There's been heated moments, but I think that at the end of the day, people can really see the human in all of us when we can be more vulnerable. And then I like to put the word respect in quotes. I find that a lot of teachers that I have learned from, or who I maybe mentored under, or who are maybe a little older than me, they see respect maybe as students being quiet and listening, or students, saying my full name, Miss Levy, instead of Miss. I feel like respect is very based in culture, but also a little bit in, all the supremacies, white supremacy, patriarchy. I'm blanking a little bit right now because I'm a little fried, but I feel like this idea of respect should be examined. And how do students feel respected? Do they feel respected if I force them to do something they're not comfortable with? Probably not. So I think that examining how a student will feel respected will really help them open up and create work about social justice. And respect also isn't just, I don't know, saying I respect you or I respect your opinion. You have to really show that you respect someone's opinion, or that you respect their work. So I think the action of respect speaks louder than the word. Learning from each other. I always like to tell my students that I learn from them as well, and especially as an artist, I've learned some cool tricks that I never would have picked up on my own. But I think that that's another way to earn respect, is to view your students as someone that you can learn from, and not yourself as someone that has all the answers, because we don't. Again, the mentor coach perspective, I don't like to call myself a teacher. I call myself their art coach, and they like that. Or the students that are about to go to college, I call myself their mentor. Or if I'm about to give them a critique on some work they're showing me, I will say, hey, artist to artist, not like teacher to student, this is what I think I would do. And I think being an artist and teaching art is important. So if you are feeling a little, I don't know, I just feel like it helps you work through a lot of the issues that might come up in the classroom. You've gone through them yourself, or you've gone through creative block. This is how you've gotten through it, or you had a rough critique in the past. This is how you got through it. So I think it's important to, also be the artist to your artists. Another, the idea of breaking down power dynamics. I don't want to tell them what to learn and what they need to learn. Of course, there's some standards. I can't just like let them do whatever. But I always check in with them quarterly. What do you want to learn, or what is working and what is not working in this class? I've totally redone classroom routines and expectations based on my current students. And we have these check-ins quarterly, and they're always a survey, and they're always anonymous so that they can be really, really honest. And my students say some amazing things. They've helped me solve so many issues, especially my first year. They helped me create all of these systems that are working now. But I'm also not afraid to ditch them if they no longer serve the students that I'm currently working with. So I think really giving them control also helps them feel really valued and really respected. This is something that's also an interesting power dynamic, or I consider it under power dynamics. Students are so smart and resourceful, and they're using TikTok and YouTube to learn a lot of techniques. So I have shifted my focus away from skill building. There's still a little bit, because not everyone's on YouTube or TikTok, but I think a lot of students can figure it out from TikTok and YouTube. So I think my class is about asking students a question and having them respond however they would like. And because of that, it's opened up so many, I think it's opened up my students so much more to really exploring what interests them. I've noticed with skill building, it's based on a lot of observational drawing. And when you train students to do observational drawing quite a bit, they have a hard time thinking about, I don't know, something from within themselves. So I think I've kind of started to stray away a little bit from observational drawing. I don't think it's very relevant in contemporary art anymore. And if they really want to learn how to draw realistic, they can learn it on YouTube. So I think that's where they have a lot of power, is they have all of these like cool tools that they use. And I need to respect that and honor that. And what can they actually learn from me? They can learn critical thinking. They can learn how to fact check. They could learn how to, or they could learn about an issue that they might not pick up on TikTok. Some of them will even chime in and say, hey, I saw that statue being torn down on TikTok, or I saw that on Instagram. So I don't know, connecting, kind of thinking about what they already know is really important when teaching social justice. I'm gonna pass on that. So I wanted to show my current project that I'm teaching. That we've been having conversations for the last 2 weeks. We are preparing for state testing. And so with state testing, our school's doing a school-wide movement to integrate more reading and writing prompts into everyday curriculum in all classes, which I mean, I think is good, but some of the students are not thrilled about it. Anyway, I've tied it into our current project, where we are learning about our nation's current or a current hot topic of what to do with racist art. And so we looked at the artist Titus Kaphar. Here's his painting of Andrew Jackson. I think these are even his, if I remember correctly, his writings on, speaking of Trail of Tears, these were his writings on his plans to relocate Indigenous communities, and these are nailed into him. We talked about Carol Walker's Fons Americanus. a sculpture she created for Tate Museum in London, where it's a tribute to the to all of the enslaved folks in the transatlantic slave trade. And I wish I could like zoom in a little bit, but it's also a commentary on the British colonial culture, and ooh, it's so, I don't know, it's so much. We watched a video on her. We looked at individual components of this sculpture up close and wrote about them. We looked at another one of her works as well, called the Marvelous Sugar Baby. And then we also looked at Kehinde Wiley, which I don't have pictured here, and then Christoph Wadziko. I have a hard time pronouncing his name, I'm sorry. But he projected refugees telling their stories onto Civil War memorials. And so we looked at the role of monuments, we looked at the role of racist art, and now my students have to create, redesign, or amend a racist monument. If they want, they can create a monument they think should exist, redesign a monument, redesign a monument that could tell a story, or amend a monument. So we are kind of looking at the different viewpoints on what to do with some of these racist monuments, specifically Confederate monuments. You know, some folks are in favor for totally destroying them. And in that case, the student might destroy and then create something new. Some folks are in favor of redesigning a monument. So they could, you know, maybe for a redesign, we can think like the Occupy Wall Street bull, and how the fearless girl was put in front of the bull to kind of change the meaning of that sculpture. So they can redesign the sculpture, or they can amend it. There's also the argument that instead of completely destroying these Confederate monuments, perhaps they should be in a museum with plaques and language that talks about why these monuments were taken down. So none of the options include keeping it the way it is. We have to do something to the monument. What are we going to do? So we've been looking at all of these different opinions. We've been reading articles, we've been watching videos, and now the students are going to decide how they feel our country should deal with some of these monuments. And again, I like to just open it up for them to do whatever they want. I'm not going to say, draw this or paint this. They can do whatever they want. And I think when teaching social justice and teaching contemporary art, I think letting students choose is the most important thing, how they're going to tackle an assignment. Leaving it this open is going to allow students to create some things I never would have thought of. It's also going to allow them to use materials perhaps a little more thoughtfully, because they saw Titus Kaphar nailing Andrew Jackson's own words to him, or the Marvelous Sugar Baby that Kara Walker did, not this one, but another work we saw where she made a sculpture of sugar, or projecting something, or creating a brand new monument. So I think opening it up for how a student can respond is really important, personally, based on my experience. And then of course they're going to write about it. Lastly, the last thing I want to share is just about I think I learned so much from my students. This year, I learned how cool anime is. I think growing up, I had always thought anime was just Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon. And my students have really opened my eyes to the world of anime. So if you're not on the anime train, I highly suggest jumping on, especially when you're teaching art. There's also a lot of great social justice in some of these animes. I wanted to leave the rest of it for questions.
Does anyone have a question? You can type it into the chat. Well, I'll ask you a question. I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about the demographics at your school of your students and, how that plays a role in, your curriculum and developing that curriculum?
So the demographic of my school, I think it's something like 40% Hispanic, 17% Native, Indigenous. I don't remember all of the percents, but it's a magnet school, which means it's a very diverse school. Magnet schools have to have certain ratios of all ethnicities to receive magnet funding from the government. So yeah, it's very diverse. Here in Tucson, we have a lot of Latinx folks that live here. We're so close to the border. I'm Mexican myself. It feels like a lot of folks you run into are mixed, and that's also true with my demographic. Is a lot of students are mixed. For curriculum development, I feel like because a lot of my students are, we're close to the border, and there's a lot of Latinx students, but there's a lot of Mexican students. So we weave a lot of Mexican culture into our class as well. But I think because a lot of the students are Mexican or Indigenous, they really have a lot to say when it comes to opening up dialogue with social justice, when talking about oppression and whitewashing history. They're always the ones that speak the loudest, and I always give them the space.
Thank you.
Do I offer instruction in native language? I do not speak any, like personally, I don't speak other languages other than Spanish. But I do know that, actually, I think a few schools on the reservations offer instruction in other languages or in indigenous languages, but I myself just speak English, or if I have a student who speaks only Spanish, like a Spanish learner or English language learner, then I might provide some instruction in Spanish.
Any other? Oh, thank you. I was also wondering, you give a lot of freedom to your students in terms of choices in materials use, and how do you manage then ordering supplies or having certain things available in your classroom for students? Do they know what's there and that's how they think, or?
So I'm still figuring that part out. But I encourage students to like collect and hoard and bring things to class. They have drawers that they share with other people, but I can give them a baggie and they can keep some of their stuff to them personally. With the digital art, a lot of my students will just like have their tablets on them, or they use their phones. Some of my students have never worked on a tablet. They're just using their phone. With paints, I mostly put like temperas and acrylics out just because I think those are easier to manage with so much happening. But there was a project where we had acrylics and temperas and watercolors and air dry clay and recycled materials. That was nuts. But you know, the work that they made was so cool and they had so much fun, and they helped clean up at the end. And with ordering supplies, even though I teach at a magnet school, and I am a little more like, for Arizona, I have a better funding situation. I still have a really small budget, and we still, you know, collect, we still receive donations, but I think I've realized that to make my small budget work, allowing more freedom allows them to kind of problem solve. Well, this is all I have, so what can I do with this? Ms. Levy's all out of paint. What can I do with colored pencils and collage?
That's a good answer. Yeah, and you know, oftentimes too, when you ask students to bring something to class as part of their artwork, sometimes they hesitate or it takes them a while to get it there. And, you know, do you find that being an issue, or are they so motivated that they do bring
Oh,
the
there's the kids that totally forget. But it's fine. Like, we find ways around it. Sometimes I will give them the pass and I'll say, I work on this large campus. I work at a school with 4,000 students, and like it was built in the early 1900s. This beautiful campus, but I'll give them the pass and just say, hey, go forage some stuff. There's the garden over there. Or you know, we'll dig through the recycling bin and find some cool, like maybe text that we can get an X-Acto blade and cut out some interesting shapes with. Or the kids found some old CDs, like, I don't know, a Paw Patrol and some other weird random CDs, and they crushed them up, which I was like really nervous about. I thought they were going to cut themselves, but they crushed them up, and they like created this really cool, like, reflective pattern on one of our mixed media projects. Or I don't know, they just get really creative finding things that you wouldn't think is a material. Chip bags.
yeah,
Yeah, they
that's
get.
exciting, I think. And also, do you find that they enjoy collaborating on some projects and works together?
Oh, for sure. I find that in person, students love to collaborate. Online, they absolutely hate it for whatever reason, even though they're like more separated online. In person, we do a lot of collaborative work, and I can't wait for that to be.
Yes, so you've been teaching online, so how has that impacted what you normally would do in the classroom?
Well, it opened it up to be more free. I finally was like, I am gonna not hold on to any of these things was holding on to that I had learned from like mentors and art teachers I had had. And I just kind of like let them problem solve and figure it out. Some of my students don't have art supplies at home, and those students have gotten really creative. Another teacher was telling me one student carved something out of a block of cheese. Like, these students, when you give them the freedom, they do really cool stuff. Some of the kids that don't have supplies have been, they decided to learn digital art on their phones. Or I found a free program online, so you don't even need a tablet or a smartphone. You can just use your Chromebook that the school gave you and play with digital art, and some of them have been using that. They actually do a lot with less.
Yeah, and use their minds and critical thinking a lot more, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that giving them these prompts and then having them respond in whatever way has been giving me, like, has been creating the most interesting art. And I'm really getting to know my students more than if I was like, we are all going to do a watercolor painting. We're all going to paint our monuments in acrylic. I wouldn't, learn as much from my students that way.
Have you ever collaborated with other teachers in the school, or art teachers or regular subject teachers?
Yeah, I've collaborated with the ELD, the English language learner instructors. My second year, I partnered with them and I helped. Well, I became really good friends with the ELD teacher, and so I would sub for her. She was going through some health stuff, so I'd sub her students, and got to know them really well. And then I would bring in some art prompts and projects for them. And we ended up having an exhibition at the end of the year where they drew like identity charts of themselves and where they come from. Um, they're none of them were born here. They were all immigrants. So it was like such an interesting project to learn about where they come from, what they remember from home, and then how they're making this new place their home. And so we created identity charts, and we just had like collaging colored pencils, and they did awesome work. Before the pandemic started, I was collaborating with our Native American Student Services to create a mural in our school, which I hope to get, like, we got the funding. We just need to be able to complete it now. But I was having students completely design it. Me and and the counselor, we were not, we were just helping figure out logistics. Like, it is this big. We need these colors of paint, but y'all are going to figure out what goes in there. And there are, I think, 12 different tribes represented on our campus. And everyone wanted, something that honored and recognized their tribes. So they were all figuring out how to put everyone's like different, like a part of their tribes into this mural. And that was really cool. But, I think half of those students have graduated now, so it's going to look different when we actually get to complete it.
Yeah, let's hope we get past this pandemic era, get
For
back to face
sure.
to face.
For sure.
But as you say, you've learned some things also during the pandemic, using technology or having students find resources at home as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I feel like, though this pandemic is awful and there's so much about it that is so bad. That's like not even the word to describe it. It just, I feel like because of it, it's given me the opportunity to be a better teacher and to reflect more and to get to know my students and for all of us to, I don't know, I feel like everything has been humanized a little more from this. We can see each other's like messes in the backgrounds or hear each other's dogs barking or sisters crying in the background. And I'm grateful, even though it's been chaos, I'm grateful for it. I just get to know my students that much more.
Yes, and the challenges that your students might face and their families too, during this pandemic, and how that's impacted their learning experience, because that's been a huge issue right now.
Yeah, some of my students have like 5 siblings at home and they're all on the same Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Yeah, online learning, I mean, it didn't help students. It didn't help students at all. But I don't know, it helped me, I guess, reflect on how I can be a better teacher for them.
And I'm certain that they enjoyed art class as one of their favorite things to keep them learning. And
They definitely said I was the one class that didn't stress them out. So
yeah, yeah, good. And hopefully the other teachers might learn something from you too.
we share a lot of info. My other teachers are pretty cool.
Good.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question? Well, it doesn't look like there are any more questions. This is recorded, so those students, and there are many who could not be here because they had either a class or they're working or something like that. So it will be available. to them. But thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us and share your work. It's very exciting what you're doing, even during the pandemic, and look forward to seeing what you do post-pandemic.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everyone that came.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.